Hi, welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Remember last week I mentioned that you should be preparing some 9.5-inch squares from your scrap stash as well as 1.5-inch strips. Well, if you have those ready, go ahead and grab those. We're going to be working on a quilt today that's going to help you use up those size strips and squares. This quilt is called Sticks and Stones. It's a great scrappy quilt. And go ahead and use your scrap stash for this. However, what I plan to do is use some beautiful fall fabrics that I have. I have a lot of beautiful fall fabrics, and we're entering the autumn season. So I can't wait to show you what I have put together using my Sticks and Stones pattern. I also want to mention, before I show you my Sticks and Stones pattern, I want to point out the quilt on the wall behind me. This is my Midwest Fields pattern, and it is in the Quilt Maker magazine, the fall issue 2025, and it starts on page 53 of that issue, and I'm so excited to see it in there. I love this quilt. It really reminds me of the Midwest fields of corn and wheat and beans. That's where I grew up. The blocks that I'm using actually are named. One is corn and beans, one represents the wheat fields, one represents the garden, and all of that is a wonderful reminder of what I grew up with in Midwest Iowa. So if you don't have, or if you're not subscribed to the fall issue of the Quilt Maker magazine, then I will have these on my website. I've got them ordered. They should be arriving within the next week, so keep checking my website if you'd like that. And there's lots of patterns in here. Mine begins on page 53. Maybe you already subscribed to the magazine. There's lots of wonderful patterns in here that you'll want to try. So here's just a quick little peek at the wall quilt that I have made. And of course, you can make this quilt as large as you want. And you'll see that I have chosen a lot of 9.5-inch squares that are from my fall themed fabrics in my stash. And then, of course, I pulled a light 1.5-inch strips from another fall fabric. And then I pulled gold that represents more of a medium or dark for the sashing and the borders. I love how it's been put together. I love how simple and quick this quilt went together. Let me show you how it's done. All right, so on my tabletop here, this is the pattern. These are my 9.5-inch squares. I do still have some leftover fall fabrics here, but I also have just a whole lot of 9.5-inch squares that are from my scrap stash. And I do have some of the 1.5-inch gold. That's what I'm using in place of the black. So you can switch out your values. All of your big blocks could be very light, or whatever you want to do. You can certainly switch out all of the values. But in place of black, I used gold. And then for the white that was in the pattern, I'm using this fall cream fabric. So that makes up all of my sashing and borders. And then you are going to need 2.5-inch strips for each of the blocks. There's one strip in each of the blocks that is a 2.5-inch wide strip. So you'll need that from either your lights or whatever values you plan to use as you're constructing this. Let me show you how this block goes together really fast and simple. All right, I have laid out the block here, and of course, remember, you can swap out the values and put lights where the darks are, darks where the lights are. This is your quilt. You do what you want to with it. As you can see, I've got the 9.5-inch square here, and again, I'm using a fall piece of fabric here for my 9.5-inch square. And then you're making strip sets, and I would recommend when you make your strip sets, these are all 1.5-inch wide, and I would just strip all of them together, a light with the dark. In my case, I did the cream with the gold and then another cream on the other side. I stripped them all together, and then I subcut the pressed strip. I pressed everything to the center, to the dark. I subcut them into 9.5-inch pieces. It's a fast way to do it. However, if you're using your scrap stash and your pieces are all different sizes, then just go ahead and sew them together and subcut whatever you can, because maybe you've got a couple of different lights, etc., and they're various lengths. Just make sure then once you've sewn them together, subcut them into 9.5-inch segments. That is going to be sewed to the side of this large square here. So that's the bottom of the quilt, that's the bottom of the block. Then you need a 12.5-inch length, and this is 1.5 inches wide again, and it's 12.5 inches long, and that's going to be sewn to the top of this section. And then this is where that 2.5 inch wide piece comes into play, and it's a light, and it is 10.5 inches long. So that's what these were subcut into, 10.5 inch lengths. And then here I have another strip set. What I did as I was sewing all these together, the leftover parts and pieces is where I would grab my 2.5 inch wide strips for this. And this is just one of your darker and your lighter strips going together. That's going to go there. So this gets sewn to this gets sewn to this, and then this will get sewn to the top. That's the block. How easy is that? Let me quick put it together and show you. I'll show you each piece as I piece it together. All right, I have sewn the strip set here to the square, and definitely do all of this chain piecing, just in assembly line fashion, one after another after another. You'll have this quilt done so quickly if you do. Then the next thing we're going to put on the top of this is this 12.5 inch long, 1.5 inch wide gold piece, and I've sewn this together. So I sewed that 2.5 inch square, which was a strip here, strip set, to the 10.5 inch by 2.5 inch wide strip. That's going to go right there. So we'll sew this together and it's done. And if you just do each section by chain, just chaining it and doing one after another of that same section that you're working on, it will really go quickly. You'll have this together in no time. I've tried pressing everything toward the dark whenever possible. That is what I've done on all of mine. So here is the block finished. I have pressed everything to the dark, square it up to 12.5 inches, and I'm going to take you back upstairs and show you my quilt. I did not make it as large as the pattern. I will have the pattern out on my website for you. You can make this any size you want, but I just made a small one. I believe I made 12. I think it was probably about like this. I made 12 blocks. And made my sashing. The sashing all the way around the quilt for the border is dark, light, dark. So you're making the same strip sets, but this time instead of light, dark, light, you're making it dark, light, dark. In my case, yours might be completely different, but that's how I've done mine. A very simple block, very simple pattern. I hope you will all try it. I would love to see your quilts. Head out to my Facebook group page, Quilting with Lori. Scrap up your stash. There's a link below. And share pictures of everything that you're making. We all love to see what everyone is working on. And I would love to see your Sticks and Stones pattern, Scrappy, or maybe fall, or maybe Christmas. Christmas is just around the corner. Here's another quick look at the quilt that I had finished. I've just got it laying here on the floor upstairs, but I wanted to share with you how I put mine together. There are 12 blocks, and I went ahead and created the border using the strip set of the dark, light, dark. The one thing I do want to point out is there are so many ways you could lay out this quilt. There is one of my blocks right here. I have placed it so that the 2.5 inch strip is at the top and this sashing is here, and the dark square is at the bottom. Then I flipped the whole thing and I've got it so that the dark square is at the top and this 2.5 inch strip is at the bottom. I kept doing that. I kept flipping and flipping. And that's what creates this beautiful diagonal design. Now, you can do that, or you can just simply put them across the row straight, however you want. Just have fun playing with this pattern and see what you can come up with. I enjoyed the diagonal rows that I created using this method. Love how it turned out. Hope you've enjoyed it. I hope to see many of yours. If you do like the content that I provide, please don't forget to like and subscribe and leave a comment. I love to read comments from my viewers. And I hope to see you next week. Next week, we're going to be working on another Two's Company Scrappy quilt block. Until next week, happy quilting.